I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip, hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop.
This episode is brought to you by TaxAct. Don't do your taxes alone. Join TaxAct's National Admin Night. Admin nights are social gatherings for getting through your to-do list. So get ready for a night of fun, finding deductions, and filing taxes with TaxAct, where you can file your federal and state return for just $49 through April 8. Let's get together and get them over with. Visit taxact.com/admin-night for details.
Hey, you. What you doing? Scrolling? Doom scrolling? Looking at other people's vacations? Miami, San Diego, Cancun? Okay, what about you? What places will you go? Expedia is the one place you go to go places. Your trip can earn rewards which you can use towards your next eligible stay. Soon, people will be doom scrolling you. You'll be that friend's friend, but with rewards. What are you waiting for? Expedia, the one place you go to go places. Terms apply.
I had polycystic kidney disease, which is a genetic disease where basically your kidney function degrades pretty severely over time. And 50 years ago, I'd be dead. 100 years ago, I'd be dead. 1,000 years ago, I'd be dead. Almost dying and looking death in the face really does change your relationship with your life goals. It really does help focus your mind wonderfully about what do you really want to do before A, you die, or B, you become too incapacitated to do the things that you've always wanted to do.
That is today's guest, Stephan Kesting, discussing his personal brush with death, which eventually led to his decision to push himself to his physical limits by kayaking 1,000 miles alone through the Canadian Subarctic. Not for the faint of heart. And of course, when you're completely alone in the wilderness up there for 6 weeks, you're dealing with the dangers of polar bears, Arctic storms, forest fires, fierce rapids, and so on. A single mistake can cost you your life. And you may be wondering, well, why would he risk his life after surviving this terrible disease? I wondered the same thing. So I asked him that question. You'll hear his answer and the story behind this journey, and plenty of powerful takeaways coming your way. I'll highlight a few. You're going to hear how challenging physical experiences can serve as powerful therapy for processing grief, trauma, and major life transitions. Some of the unique mental challenges and benefits of solo travel, whether in the wilderness or urban environments. How to apply the expedition mindset to your daily life, allowing you to conquer everyday obstacles and goals. And an understanding of why pursuing satisfaction over happiness can sometimes lead to more meaningful life decisions and lasting fulfillment, and so much more coming your way in this conversation. Let's get into it. Buckle up, strap in. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey, it's Jason here with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. As you heard at the top, today we have Stephan Kesting here. He's a martial artist, firefighter, and wilderness explorer who completed an incredibly challenging solo expedition. He wrote a book about it, which we'll discuss. It's called Perseverance, Life and Death in the Subarctic. Stephan also has a podcast called the Strenuous Life Podcast, if you want to check it out. And one of the big themes that emerges in this conversation is this idea of processing grief through adventure. I just wanted to bring this up because I know physical challenges or a change in environment like you get when you travel can create that space for some healing, for some personal growth. And for me, grief can mean a lot of things, not just the loss of a loved one. It can mean, of course, the loss of a relationship, a career, perhaps you're closing an important chapter in your life. It is important to carve out that space and to make time and have an intention around grieving that. Travel can certainly help with that, as you probably know. But I thought that was worth bringing up as we go into this conversation. And stick around on the back end, by the way. I'm going to share something Stephan mentioned that I've been practicing recently that has really helped me cut down on all of the noise that is coming in terms of information and helping me decide what to focus on. Perhaps this will do the same for you. It's JITL, baby. You'll learn what that is in the outro portion of this episode. Don't forget, we have a newsletter, by the way, zerototravel.com/newsletter. It is free to sign up, and you can keep in touch over there off the pod. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Stephan. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the other side, my friend. Cheers. Stephan Kesting, welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to talk about travel and maybe travel in some kind of weird places.
Brothers in cold climates as well, you and I. You're up in Canada. I'm in Norway.
I am. And my favorite part of Canada is the part that's at the same latitude as Norway, but degree for degree, Canada's quite a bit colder if you go to the same latitude.
I was going to ask you about studying botany, which doesn't seem at all in line with where your career landed, but then it kind of does at the same time. We're talking about your experience studying at the University of British Columbia. I just thought that'd be a cool starting point to go back and what got you interested in botany, and then we can talk about how you ended up in martial arts and the rest of it. But
ever since I was a little 8-year-old kid, I knew absolutely 100% I wanted to be a physicist. And then I got to university, I did my undergrad at McGill, and I got to first year of physics, and I realized I hated it. And so that's one of these moments when you build your entire identity on something. I'm going to be a physicist. I want to be a physicist. I hate physics. What do I do now? And so I started casting around for, I did want to get a degree. I did want to study, but what? And in high school, I just hated biology. But there was a program at McGill University, Ecology, Evolution, and Animal Behavior. Sort of the outdoorsy, the applied aspect of biology. And it turns out that I really liked that. And it's kind of the underlying thing holding it all together, actually, is evolution. To talk about biology without talking about evolution is kind of like trying to talk about civil engineering without talking about gravity, right? You need that as a central unifying theme for anything in biology to make sense. So I did a lot of work on biology and also climate change, which that was in the late 80s, early 90s. And even then, it was pretty clear that that was going to be happening. So that's actually what led me to doing a master's in botany at UBC, was wanting to get up to the Arctic, and not have to pay for it myself for once, to do it as in the context of research. So I did end up doing a master's on climate change in the Western Arctic, so close to Tuktoyaktuk, close to the Mackenzie River, or if people don't know where that is, as the part of Canada when you're getting a little bit closer to Alaska, the left side. It was a nice way to get up north, and I've really, any excuse I can get to get into the far north of Canada, I'll take it.
Yeah. Well, did you grow up in a rural environment? Were you accustomed to being in the wilderness quite a bit, or were you more urban childhood?
Half and half. Half and half. I grew up in Toronto, Canada's largest city, but my parents had a place out in the country as well. So I spent a significant amount of time running around the bush and climbing through caves and, just spending time outside. So I wouldn't say it was super rural. I wasn't hunting raccoons or anything, but, spent some time in a tent. One of my very first memories as a kid, I think my first memory as a kid is watching my brother, one of my younger brothers, come home from the hospital. And then another one is waking up in a tent when we were camping, when I was camping with my parents. And I think that's actually the first memory. So clearly it made an impression on me as a little kid. And then so much of what we value as adults is actually stuff we were exposed to when we were kids.
It's a great reminder as a parent of 2 children. Sometimes the days can slip by and you're like, am I actually doing a good job exposing them to the right things? What are the right things and the wrong things? I don't.
I don't know for sure, but I know that the part of the answer is to expose them to a wide variety of things, because you just never know what's going to stick and what's going to make a lasting impression. Right? There's so many random encounters in life, and there's so many random memories that then form a pretty significant part of your identity, or give you a direction that you would never ordinarily have gone into. So having a wide, I don't know what the answer is, but I know that having a wide variety of experiences is important.
In your case, you were at some point exposed to martial arts, becoming really a lifelong martial artist. I mean, I used to watch all kinds of kung fu and ninja movies with my dad. Now, I went and I bought the ninja costume at the flea market, and I had Chinese stars, and I got all these ninja weapons and everything. But the difference between us is that I didn't do anything with it. I just cosplayed as a ninja. You can actually kick some serious butt. So I was just wondering, do you remember the moment you kind of fell in love with martial arts and how that led to this career you have?
Yeah.
Part of your career anyway.
Well, I guess the twin passions of my life would be martial arts and outdoors. And it seems like strange bedfellows, and sometimes they are. It's a pretty different community, but there's a little bit of overlap there as well. Honestly, the truth is, I don't remember. I was always interested in it. I remember trying to talk my mom into letting me train judo, I think it was, because she was not down with me training ninjutsu. She didn't want me to do kung fu. She didn't want me to do even jiu-jitsu, figuring that it was all like punching and whatever. It took 3 years, but eventually I got to do judo. So yeah, it was a pretty concerted campaign right from an early age. Maybe it was that, I grew up in Canada. My first language was not English. My parents were German and Swiss immigrants. So that was the language we spoke at home. I ended up in grade 1, not really speaking English. And of course, you're the weird kid, and, you get teased a lot. I'm psychoanalyzing an 8-year-old who's almost 47 years away from me in time, based off of what I remember. So it's tough to say. Possibly it was wanting to defend myself against bullies. I think obviously the motivation to train and keep on doing martial arts has changed over the decades, as it hopefully would. At this point, it's more for the intellectual challenge of it. It's more for the camaraderie of it. It's more for the wanting to develop something, anything, like to go deep into a topic and to really understand it, or try to understand it as best as you can. So the motivations have definitely changed over the years.
That's really a lovely thing when you find something you're passionate about. And I play guitar, for example. It's like, it's an endless pursuit. Like, you can never master it. It's just kind of something you can always go deeper with. You can always learn more. And I think that's a beautiful thing to find in life, when you find something like that you can go really deep with and just keep deep diving with, and it never gets old,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're right. It is an endless pursuit, because I'm sure the very best guitar player in the world is down on himself about something, and like, man, I'm the best. And I'm way outside my area of expertise here, but I'm really good at this aspect of guitar, but this aspect of guitar sucks. In a jiu-jitsu context, I might have really good escapes from the bottom position when somebody's pinning me, but my choking setups, how to choke somebody from the top, they're not Yeah, I'm not at the level where I should be. Okay, that's what I got to work on next. And really, the outdoors is the same way. There's so many facets of being, if you want to call it an outdoorsman, being a good outdoorsman, right? There's your natural history component. There's your first aid component. There's your navigation component. There's your physical endurance component. There's your technical, how good are you with an axe? How good are you with a paddle? Are you good at flat water paddling? Are you good at whitewater paddling? Are you good at paddling in waves? There's always somewhere to go deeper. And, I made a list once of the things that I would need to work on to get better at the outdoor stuff, right? There's a kind of an approach I used all the time in martial arts. What are the next 3 things I should work on? And applying that to the outdoors that's a pretty long list. I've got a lot of reading to do and a lot of training to do. And then you just try and skim off, okay, what are the things that are actually going to keep me alive out there? And then we'll start with those, because it'd be rather nice to not freeze to death out on the tundra or be eaten by a polar bear. And all things being equal, we'll start with that being the goal.
Be nice to avoid that. Yeah, getting it out of your head and onto the page, and just in a practical way, like what are the next 3 things I should work on? I mean, you were applying that to martial arts, to the outdoors, but anybody listening can apply that to anything. Does that practice help you, I don't want to say disconnect, but sort of disassociate with the self-doubt that may be associated with keeping it in your head? If you're like, there's a way to look at where you're like, we're practically speaking, here's like some things I need to get better on, use the chokehold thing, for example. Or you could look at it and say, oh, all these people are so much better at this than me. You know what I mean? Like, it's the same thing framed differently.
Do I struggle with self-doubt? Absolutely. Absolutely. In the outdoor context, especially when you're trying to do something difficult, then yeah, you struggle with self-doubt all the time. Because if something's a slam dunk, if something is you can 100% do this, I don't know, going for a walk in the park, then where's the challenge? In a martial arts context, if you're going into a competition and you can absolutely, that you can absolutely destroy everybody there and there's no chance of you losing, then you're in the wrong division. You've entered the kids division and you're a 200-pound grown man, right? Like, that's the only way to be certain there. And even then, it's not 100% certain. So is it sort of self-talking versus a positive approach to, I should get better at this, or I suck at that exact same thing? It's always both. It's always both. I mean, you try to reframe it in a positive way. Like, the energy might come from a negative place, like, I suck at this. And then you turn it around into like, I should get better at this. It starts in one place, goes to another.
Right. Yeah, it can be part of the process for sure. As long as you get to that end part where you're not dwelling in the, the self-doubt, I suck part.
Yeah. I guess the self-doubt that I'm talking about in the outdoors isn't so much the I suck part. Like, it's a different kind of self-doubt. It's more, will I be able to finish this objectively? Will I be able to complete this trip? Will I be able to complete this challenge safely without dying? I've got a podcast as well. I've interviewed Jost Kobusch, this crazy German guy whose goal is to climb Everest, which lots of people have done, without oxygen, which lots of people have done, by himself, which now not too many people have done, in the middle of winter, which nobody has done, up the West Ridge route, which has had more people die on it than succeed on it. It's now his 4th year. He just got back from his 4th year, I think. And his success was going slightly higher than he did last year. He still hasn't succeeded. So I imagine in that context, self-doubt, am I doing the right thing, is something that he struggles with all the time, right? You're always second guessing yourself. When I'm out in the bush navigating a really complicated piece of terrain, I'm always second guessing myself. Am I really where I think I am? Like, navigation, you'd think it's easy. You're on a lake. Just go. No, some lakes in the Canadian North, like they are in Norway, are incredibly complicated. Like, it looks more like a Jackson Pollock painting. Like, a whole bunch of paint has been dropped on a canvas. And if you go the wrong way, it could literally be a week of your time to get back to the right place. It's ridiculous how complicated some of these lakes are. I'm picking one example. So every moment, basically, you're asking, am I really where I think I am? Is the GPS lying to me? Has the lake changed since the map on the GPS was created? Have the water levels changed? Is this route still open? If I really am here, what should I be seeing? That's doubting the information coming at you all the time, but it's for a good cause, right? You don't want to. It's the things that you think you know for sure that just aren't so that get you into trouble. So you want to constantly be questioning yourself, and that's actually it's a form of doubt. You're doubting where you are, and you're doubting your belief as to where you think you are. But it's important because you don't know for sure, and it could have major consequences if you're going the wrong way.
We'll get back to the interview in just a moment. I know you love earning travel rewards and cash back, and that's why you're going to love Rakuten. With Rakuten, you can earn cash back on everything you need to book your dream trip, hotels, flights, rental cars, experiences, and more, while still booking through your favorite travel sites. And don't worry, cash back can be earned on top of earning the credit card points and the hotel and airline loyalty points that matter most to you, depending on how you make your booking. Plus, with Rakuten, you can also earn cash back on groceries and other purchases like electronics, pet supplies, and more. And the best part, you can join today for free and start earning cash back on top of your travel rewards. Go to Rakuten.com or get the app. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Rakuten, the most rewarding way to shop.
Refreshing wild cherry cola meets smooth cream. The treat you deserve. Pepsi Wild Cherry and Cream. Treat yourself.
Now, back to the show. Can we talk about the lead up to the trip? You did the 1,000-mile exploration of this ancient trade route and migration route. I want to talk about the lead up because you mentioned a bit earlier the sort of identity crisis you had related to physics, right? You're like, oh, I don't like this. What does that mean? And we build up these identities, and they're these things are a part of us. And I can imagine for you being so physical in nature, what you do, with martial arts and in the outdoors and everything else, having this kidney disease, and in the book you said, quote, losing my ability to do normal physical things was panic inducing, and my quality of life fell off a cliff. There's the quality of life aspect, and there's also the identity aspect, along with many other aspects. I really wanted to hear a bit more about that time in your life. If you want to share some things you haven't shared before, like I don't know where you were at that point in your life journey, but I know a lot of that led into the trip that we're going to talk about today. So you want to give us some context there with what was going on? And I'm sorry to hear that, you had to deal with this. I mean, it sounds really terrible.
I'm still here, so that we can skip to the ending. So that's the story does have a happy ending for now, so that's okay. For context, I had polycystic kidney disease, which is a genetic disease where basically your kidney function degrades pretty severely over time. And 50 years ago, I'd be dead. 100 years ago, I'd be dead. 1,000 years ago, I'd be dead. It's really only modern.
That's not that long ago,
No, it's. I'm incredibly grateful for modern medicine. Of course, there are problems with modern medicine. Of course, there are problems with big pharma. I'm alive because of big pharma, and I'm alive because of modern medicine. So, there's at the very worst, it's a double-edged sword. But, I have to acknowledge why I'm alive. So I was dying of polycystic kidney disease. And as you alluded to, as time goes on, your ability to do stuff degrades. You just become so much more tired. Just the fatigue is crushing.
Gradual, or all of a sudden, like one day you're doing something and the next. Yeah. How was it for you?
It's gradual. It's gradual. You can basically go from 100% kidney function down to 50% function without noticing it too much. Yeah, you're a little bit more fatigued. And the way I found out about it is I had just done some sparring. I had done some MMA sparring with a couple of friends. And after training, I had pissed blood before, right? I'd gone to the bathroom and peed and, I guess I got hit in the kidney. And I just thought this was normal, right? I was training hard, right? Ah! And then one day I came home and I was peeing blood. It's like, I didn't get hit. We were just doing jiu-jitsu. Like, there's something wrong here, because, it's explicable if you're doing rugby or doing football and you get hit in the kidney. Okay, now there's a reason. But now there was no reason. And so I went to the doctor, and one thing led to another. And yes, I had inherited this condition. And then I had to live with that knowledge for a while, and then think about the consequences. And then gradually my ability to do stuff started degrading. And that's really tough when mortality is tough, right? You could die here. That's tough. But also when you base your life on doing physical things, right? Martial arts, especially fully contested martial arts, where you're actually training against full resistance as opposed to doing Tai Chi in the park or something. The outdoor stuff. And then also I'm a firefighter, right? That's a physical job, and I like the physical aspect of it. And I've, when presented with opportunities to advance and go up in rank in the fire department, I've declined because I want to stay on the truck. I want to do the physical stuff and, kind of figure that stuff out under pressure. So now your ability to do that is declining. And when you look forward to what's going to have to happen here, a kidney transplant eventually, what's my function of life, or what's my quality of life? What's my function going to be after that? You don't know. I mean, yeah, you could die during the surgery. People die routine surgeries all the time, or complications after surgery. That's not uncommon. But let's assume I survive. What does surviving look like? Does surviving mean that I have to, that I only have a couple good hours a day and that I can't ever do the physical things ever again? So that's incredibly anxiety inducing. In a way, it's more anxiety inducing than just dying. Dying, I can sort of deal with. I can try and put my affairs in order to the best of my ability. I can try and arrange for my kids to, be taken care of. I had just started dating the woman who would become my wife. So that was pretty stressful to tell her. We just started dating. And then like a month in, I was like, hey, I got to tell you something. I'm actually dying right now. I don't know what's going to happen. And, I wouldn't blame you if you took off or if we split up and then got back together if after we know the outcome of what's going to happen here. So to her credit, she didn't run for the door. She didn't bolt. That was a pretty good way to pressure test a relationship. Fake your own near-death experience and see if they stick with you, kids. That's you didn't think you were going to get relationship advice on the Zero to Travel podcast.
Yeah,
but I'm full of bad ideas. And so as I was so finding a kidney donor, I did have friends who came out of nowhere to offer to go get tested, and they did get tested, and I felt incredibly grateful to them. But ultimately, it was my brother, and that was humbling.
Right?
And Christoph, yeah. And I would 1,000 times rather have given a kidney than asked for a kidney. Like it's an awful feeling to have to ask somebody for that. But I did, right? I thought of my kids as like, I owe it to them to have the best chance of surviving. So that was the energy I needed to do that. And I got wheeled into the OR, and there, sitting on the table, the metal little table beside the slab, was a little red bag, which had his kidney in it, which had been removed an hour earlier. And then I went under. And it's a weird feeling. I've had other surgeries. I've had lots of orthopedic stuff, but to have, sort of from your shoulders and your hips inward worked on is quite different from having, I don't know, your forearm plated or something. Yeah, you're going unconscious in both cases.
Your family members involved. There's many layers to this. Timeline wise, when was that versus like when you got married? And then we'll talk about how, the day after you got married, you went on this trip, which is your wife, Eva, right? She must be a saint to let you take off into the wilderness on this death-defying journey. The day after you get married, you're like, it's been great. What a great honeymoon. See you later, honey.
Well, the kidney transplant was in 2015. And then it was a rough couple of years recovering from that, because your body essentially has to undo all the things it's been doing to try and keep you alive as your kidney function plummets. So, for example, I had awful growing pains. Do you remember like the pains in your shins when you were a little kid when you're growing? Because there's, calcium and magnesium ions being deposited all over the place. Well, it turns out that as you're dying of kidney failure, your body is pulling calcium, magnesium out of your bones and trying to use that to osmotically balance your blood. And then when you go up in kidney function, it starts stuffing things back in there, and it's incredibly painful. In addition to pain, there was all kinds of post-operative infections and dialing in the medication correctly. And then I had to have both kidneys, the old kidneys, pulled out. And that was actually a really tough ordeal. In some ways, the kidney removal was tougher than the kidney implantation. I have a friend who lost a kidney to cancer, and I told him he's a complete wimp, that anyone can have one kidney removed. It takes a real man to have two kidneys removed. So we have a good relationship.
Forever bragging rights.
Yeah.
I like that you have a sense of humor about this stuff.
Well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Yeah, so that was my 2016 and 17. In that time, I did start doing some outdoor stuff again. Like I set myself a goal, and that goal was within 6 months of the transplant, I wanted to do an expedition. And that expedition ended up being a 1-day, 50-kilometer trek in the mountains in the middle of winter on the shortest day of the year. So December 21st. And I actually sent it. I remember the text I sent to my would-be wife. And it was the text from Shackleton's, the ad for Shackleton's expedition to the Antarctic. Men wanted for hazardous journey, low pay, chance of survival uncertain, lots of suffering involved. I forget the exact quote. I could look it up, I suppose, and sent it to her. And she said, yes, absolutely. What are we doing? So, okay, this is another good sign. To jump forward, then we got engaged December of 2018. And we'd already had a long discussion about that in 2019, I would be doing this solo trip. Again, here I am dispensing relationship advice on a travel podcast. But people get caught up in this idea of fairsies, squaresies. We're in a relationship, therefore everything you do, I have to do. And that's not true. Everything that you want to do, I have to support, and everything you want to do, I have to support. That's fair. It's not like you get to go on a solo trip, I have to do a solo trip now. You got to go on a trip to Palm Springs to play golf. I have to go on a trip to Palm Springs to play golf. No, I hate golf. I don't want to go to Palm Springs to play golf. You go do you, and I'll do me, and I'll support you doing you, and you support me being me. So we had together, we had set the summer of 2019 as for me doing that 1,000-mile solo trip in the Arctic. And we were engaged, but we hadn't set a date. So we had a date, and in theory, it was when I got back from that trip, September. But then we lost the venue, and the only remaining slot that we could get at the venue that we wanted, it was an outdoor garden at UBC, was the day before I was to leave for the trip. And she said, yeah, let's do it. Let's grab that date.
Then you know
So
you're
I
marrying the
ended
right
up-
person, right?
Yeah. So I got married one day, and then the next day I left in a taxi to go to the airport to begin the long journey to northern Saskatchewan and the jumping off point. So yeah, it was a solo moon. We did have a honeymoon at some point, but I got a solo moon in first. So in my
Solo
defense,
moon, nice.
the date for the trip was set before we got engaged. So that's my only
Right.
my only defense, Your Honor.
No judgment here. I mean, I went on a hitchhiking trip like right before my wedding, so
Really?
similar. Yeah. So I got support with that. Yeah, can't complain. It's like, all right, cool. Well, this ultimately turned into the book, Perseverance: Life and Death in the Subarctic. Going into this adventure, having just shared all of these personal health issues you had and this kidney disease and everything, did that change your relationship with death? Like, do you think you would have gone on a trip like this pre-kidney issues? Or, how did that change your mindset around that type of adventure?
It certainly does. Almost dying and looking death in the face really does change your relationship with your life goals. It really does help focus your mind wonderfully about what do you really want to do before A, you die, or B, you become too incapacitated to do the things that you've always wanted to do. And this trip took place in the subarctic and Arctic of Canada, in the Nunavut region. So the Eastern Arctic, if you think of Hudson Bay, that great big body of water, it's really very large that comes down into the center of Canada. This is just to the left of it if you're looking at a map. And it's a historical area. I'd read lots and lots of accounts of early travelers, like Samuel Hearne traveled through that area in the 1700s. Franklin, on his first expedition to find the Northwest Passage, traveled through that area. J.B. Terrell, Oberholzer and McGee, P.G. Downs. I'd read all these accounts. And so it's this area that had been calling out to me, that I had wanted to go travel in. I'd kind of brushed up against the edges of it on some other trips. But I knew that this would be a big expedition, so it was always next year. And, sometimes to pull off a big coup, to pull off a big endeavor, takes a lot of preparation. I in general, if you have a goal, you should get started on it yesterday, but it doesn't mean you can achieve it tomorrow. So I'd been thinking about this trip for years and years and years. And then being on death's door, being wheeled into the operating room, I was actually thinking about, I wonder if I can get back into good enough shape to do a trip like that, to head up to this area, this land of little sticks. And that was kind of my light at the end of the tunnel, or this beacon of hope that I had set to focus my recovery. Right now, once you have a goal like that, what do you need to do? Well, you need to get better. You need to get in better shape. You need to work on your endurance. You need to get all the medical stuff under control as best as you can. You need to do the research. It gave me a goal. So like I said, I'd been thinking about that for a long time, but coming that close to death really helped drive it home. Okay, in that case, I was 50 years old. You're 50 years old. You don't have an infinite amount of time to do this wild running around in the bush. Right? Let's say 60 is the new 40. That's still not an infinite amount of time. Eventually, the body's going to give out. You won't be able to do that anymore. So let's do it. So having this vision really helped provide direction in the recovery, and it meant that I had to do the things to enable a trip like that.
I want to hear a bit more about on the ground experience as well, some of the things you went through, and the solo aspect, which I know you've talked about in the book quite a bit. But that idea, answering the call to adventure, let's say you mentioned the one-day expedition you did earlier. This is obviously a bigger expedition. I'm just pulling this out for listeners because I think that everything that you just shared, the sort of like all the things you needed to do before this expedition, granted, this was a bigger type of expedition, physical, out in the wilderness, perhaps more dangerous. But the idea that you can answer your own call to adventure. We talk a lot about the trip and the epic trip and all the things that happen and the experiences and everything. But I think it doesn't get discounted, but maybe it's not talked about enough. The whole lead up, like just making the decision and answering the call to adventure is an adventure in and of itself. And it's in terms of self-development, maybe skill building, depending on what you're doing, facing big life decisions, maybe your relationship with death, even like considering that, like all of these things can happen just by simply making the decision to answer a call to adventure. And I think that's powerful in and of itself in terms of like, hey, if you're listening to this, you're sitting on the fence with something, whether it's going to Paris for the first time or, going 1,000 miles in the Arctic. I think that there's a lot of value in that lead up period.
The near-death experience that I had, coupled with the fact that I had lost 2 brothers in the previous decades to misadventure, and coupled with the fact that working as a firefighter, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of people die. I've seen hundreds of people in their last moments, whether that's in some horrific car accident, dying from a heart attack, working on them with CPR. This might seem terrible, and believe me, losing a brother and losing 2 brothers is terrible. Sitting beside your grandmother as she's transitioning from being alive to unequivocally being dead is a terrible experience. But all these deaths are also a gift to you. They're also, each one of them is a memento mori. That person that you're doing CPR on, yeah, it's not, CPR is messy. You feel the bones break under your hand. All kinds of terrible things happen to a body as it's dying. But if you can focus on the fact that they're giving you a gift, they're giving you an undeniable reminder of your own mortality, and it's essentially a kick in the butt saying, hey, this is going to be you someday. What are you going to do in the meantime between now and that unknown time in the future when it's you who's having CPR done on you? So that's a way to reframe loss and death. And in a certain sense, your own near-death experience is the ultimate memento mori. But anybody around you who's dying or close to death, they're also giving you a gift. And that gift is that reminder and potentially a call to adventure, regardless of what that adventure is. I mean, that adventure could be finally going back to school to get that degree in geography that you've always wanted. Right? That's going to be an adventure. That's not going to be easy, but it's still the next thing that you know that you need to do, or that you know that you should be doing. So one of the crux parts of that big trip that I did was a place called Newton Lake. Newton Lake is an incredibly complicated lake. It's the most complicated lake I've ever been on. The bottom part of it is in the trees. The northern part of it is out on the open tundra. So as you paddle up, you transition from forest to broken forest to sort of a taiga environment to full-on tundra. It's an amazing experience to paddle up that. It's also a very difficult lake to paddle because you have issues with wind and with ice and storms and exposure and bugs and all the rest of it. But for me, that paddling across that lake, I kept that entire time I was thinking about my brothers and that idea of transitioning, right? They transition from life to death. I was transitioning from one environment to the other, and kind of in that space in between that I had visited, that tree-lined space that I had visited, getting close to death, but not quite crossing over. So in a certain sense, I use the outdoors as my therapy, really. I think that it's a place where I've retreated to when I've had to deal with issues of mortality or grief or whatnot. And I don't think I'm the only one. The person that I sort of served as my avatar for, hey, you can go on out into the wilderness alone and do difficult trips. He had done, as a friend of mine, he was in Laval University. Basically, he would go and do a long, difficult, almost masochistic solo trip every single time he had a breakup. And he had a lot of breakups. So he would use, I guess, the difficult solo trip as a way to process his feelings around yet another relationship breakup. I'm not the only person who uses these self-imposed difficult experiences as an arena for processing difficult emotions.
We'll get back to the interview in just a moment.
Blowing ad budget on metrics that look great till the CFO sees them, that's bull spend. And marketers are calling it out in Dashboard Confessions.
I remember telling my boss, it'll be good for the brand, when leads were slow. Yeah, it wasn't.
Cut the bull spend. LinkedIn lets you target by company, job title, and more. Advertise on LinkedIn. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a $250 credit. Go to linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Now, back to the show. Do you think the masochistic element that you just described, the difficulty, is because it doesn't have to be so extreme? You know, why?
This is true. Like you could go do the Camino de Santiago, right? It's difficult. You got to walk for 20, 30 kilometers a day, but odds of dying on the Camino are pretty low, right? And the odds of not being able to find food on the Camino are zero. And you're going to have a warm place to sleep in at the end of the day. So you can go through a journey. The accusation of masochism.
I didn't mean it as an accusation. I'm not saying I see it as that, but you know, you said your avatar friend was doing these masochistic trips.
It's a totally fair question. And there are definitely days when it feels like masochism. Now, why does it have to be difficult? Well, in part, there is no easy way to get into this incredibly beautiful landscape known as the Canadian Arctic and the tundra. There is no easy way to try and catch the caribou migration. There is no easy way to be the only person around for hundreds of miles in all direction. The route, I mean, unless you're rich enough to charter a helicopter and have that fly at a cost of $20,000 to drop you off in the middle of the tundra and then come back and get you a week later. So I guess there is a way to get into that country, but realistically, it's a lot of work to get there. You could get dropped off on the top of Everest with a helicopter too. So if your goal was purely to be on top of Everest, there would be an easier way to do it. Now, that would be beside the point, right? That would be a pretty hollow victory. I've been on Everest. Yeah. And you got dropped off there by some futuristic helicopter, which doesn't exist yet, but that functions at high altitude. Okay, so that doesn't count. And similarly, getting to the Arctic the easy way. I mean, if that's your only way to get up there, okay, I understand. There are ecotourism lodges scattered across the north where for $10,000 for a week, you can go and tour the polar bears. And maybe that's the only way you can do it. But the difficulty of the journey itself is part of the experience, at least for me. And it's kind of a way to test yourself. And it's a way to go deeper because it's during the endless slogging against the wind. It's during the day after day grind of trying to survive out there. It occupies the body and it frees the mind. Now, you're not out there necessarily philosophizing deep thoughts all day. I mean, most of your mind is going, oh, look at that wave. Oh, that's not going to curl. Okay, no, but the waves are worse over there. I wonder if I go behind this island to the right here, if the wind shadow from that will cut me down. And then I'm going to have to repack the boat so the bow's a little bit heavier so that it tracks better. Like all day long, you're running these subroutines to optimize your travel through there. Just as I imagine a mountaineer would be going, what if I put my ice axe here? Is this block of ice going to break off? is this rock solid to stand on.
You're right in the present moment. I mean, you have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're not necessarily philosophizing deep thoughts, but not on this last trip, but on a trip many years ago, after the death of my first brother. I spent about a year after my brother died, and I was just getting by. I was kind of in a zombie state, just drifting from job to job. I picked out another trip, and I used that. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I was drawn to go do this trip. And after about a week of paddling on this great big river, the Athabasca River, I was just navigating along one day, immersed in the minutia of travel. Oh, my wrist is beginning to hurt a little bit. Oh, the wind is shifting. I wonder if the clouds are going to come in, and I wonder if it's going to rain tonight. I think there's a good place to camp based on the map, another 20 kilometers up. And then all of a sudden, the grief of having lost a brother just hit me across the back of the head like a baseball bat. And I was there sobbing my guts out in the middle of this river, not having any indication that was going to happen. And it was good. It was good. It was hard in the moment, obviously. I'm glad it didn't happen on the bus. But I think doing that hard physical thing and repetitive physical thing allowed my monkey mind and my physical body to be occupied, and then allow those other things to drift up and bubble up and process. So for me anyway, it's a deeply, deeply healing moment. And I'm a little bit leery about using words like healing and trauma, but I'll go that, losing somebody that you've grown up with cheek by jowl is a traumatic experience. I'll grant you that that's trauma and that it needs to be healed from. So the difficulty of the journey is actually, it's not detraction. It's actually part of the draw. Is that masochistic? Is masochism the right word? Well, it's difficult and it's self-imposed, and it kind of you go into the experience knowing that there are going to be insane levels of black flies and mosquitoes. You know that there's going to be headwinds. You know that your body's just going to feel trash at the end of some of the days. And is that different from going to the gym, knowing that you're going to be really sore the next day? The first time that somebody goes to the gym, they're like, oh my God, I'm so sore, I can't move. And then after they've been going to the gym for a couple of years, they're like, I had a really good workout. I can barely move my legs. Is that masochism? I don't know.
Right. Since you brought that word up, I thought that would be an interesting lens through which to explore it. But I agree. I mean, it's, know thyself, right? Like for you, it sounds like like you said, you've based your whole career around physicality, like a lot of the stuff you do is very physical in nature. And that puts you in this flow state, or puts you in a state where you're able to process things. I mean, that's a beautiful thing to know about yourself and to be able to go do. And I think that what a gift to be able to have that experience out on the lake, like you just described. I think that's just such a beautiful gift. And this is another thing about travel that, for people listening, again, there's all forms of travel, but if you feel like you need some kind of a trip to just for space to process things, I don't know what it is. I mean, something about that change in physical location, environment, if you're removing yourself from a culture, even going overseas, some of us just need that for some healing.
Absolutely. And your path might not be my path. What you need might not be. I'm not advocating going alone into one of the most remote areas in the world and pushing your body as hard as you can. And in a very specific location. That's my way. That doesn't have to be your way. Maybe, use the example of going to Paris alone. Or maybe not alone. Maybe going to, Paris with your family. Although I will make an argument that traveling alone is an entirely different animal from traveling in a group. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but I think solo travel really allows for far more opportunities in an outdoor context, it can be more dangerous, but sometimes it can also be safer. So solo travel in the outdoors is an interesting topic. I guess maybe the conventional travel equivalent would be if you were a woman traveling alone. And you've had some women who've done some interesting traveling on your show. It's one thing to go to Paris alone as a woman. It'd be an entirely different thing to go to Morocco alone as a woman. These are two different things, and one is inherently riskier and more difficult, just based off of, I was talking to some women who had traveled alone to Morocco recently, so that's the example that comes to mind.
I did want to hear your advice for anybody listening that is like, you know what, maybe I'm up for an outdoor type of adventure. Maybe it's not as big in terms of like the landscape or the distance you're covering and all that, but you can hop on a bike or just walk out your front door and walk for several days and be on an adventure. I mean, just being outside and kind of like getting out of your comfort zone, I think is the point we're both making. But in terms of being out in nature, somebody wants to dip their toes in, maybe they don't have a ton of experience being out in nature with those types of adventures, but they're really interested in it. They're curious about it. What's your best advice for getting started?
Well, you use the word dip your toes into it, and that's exactly right. You can't go from 0 to hero overnight, or if you do, that's a really dangerous progression. So you have to acquire. There's the skills, there's the knowledge, and there's the aptitude. So start with doing a really small trip. Start by going for a hike by yourself. Some people have never gone for a hike by themselves. And if you just absolutely hate it, then don't do it. Say you wanted to go canoeing. Okay, so now that requires a little bit more technical skill than hiking. So now how do you go and acquire those basic skills? There are books, there are videos, there are courses. I've done all the above. I spent a lot of time messing around in boats. And because there's the hard skills of, can you get a boat to go straight in whitewater? Hard skill in hiking would be, here's your GPS, there's your location, where's the trail, right? How do you follow? Because not a lot of people, they can follow the arrow that's pointing on their GPS, but they don't know what those lines on the landscape mean. So you have to be able to like look at your GPS and go, oh, those series of lines there, that's that ridge over there. So that's a skill. Basic first aid would be a skill. Basic insulation and weatherproofing is a skill, and it's also gear, right? If you can be as tough as you want. If you take the toughest Inuit hunter who ever lived, and you take all his clothes off and you dump him in the middle of the ice pack, he's gonna die, right? What keeps him alive out there is his clothing and his gear, and having a snow knife to build an igloo, and having a harpoon to catch a seal, and having a way to, many thick layers of clothing to not freeze to death. So the acquiring of gear is also important. As far as I'm concerned, in the outdoors, one of the most important things you can have is really high quality rain gear, because hypothermia is the biggest killer. You can be worried about bears, and you should have basic bear skills. And yes, I have run into bears, and yes, I've had close encounters with bears. It could have gone different. But the thing that you're risking when you're in the outdoors is hypothermia. So do you have the right clothing? Do you have something that's insulative? Do you have some kind of wind or water layer? Do you know how to feed yourself in the outdoors? Do you know roughly how many calories you're going to need? And all this can be built up over time. It can be built up by going on a short hike where the consequences of failure are low. That's a general principle that's good to think about. If you were training for a marathon, you wouldn't go out and run a marathon every day to get ready for a marathon. You would go for a jog. Then you would do, a walk-run program. Run for a minute, walk for a minute, run for a minute, walk for a minute. Then you'd work up to 5K. Now you'd have your long day. That might be a 10K run, maybe. It's super slow with friends. And then other days of the week, you might be doing a shorter run and you'd be working in some kind of recovery. I don't know, maybe massage therapy, maybe a sauna, who knows? So you're not doing the finished thing to get ready for the finished thing. You're not running a marathon to get ready for a marathon. Similarly, I'm not preparing for an Arctic expedition by doing an Arctic expedition. Of course, previous Arctic expeditions help, but last summer I did a trip and there was potentially some very difficult whitewater on it. Now, difficult whitewater when you're on an expedition means you've got a 16-foot long or 17-foot long boat with 300 pounds of gear in it, plus you, that's 500 pounds. It's a big barge and you're maneuvering it through whitewater. And if you flip and if you swamp and if you lose that, you lose, well, potentially $20,000 worth of gear. You're potentially looking at a $10,000 float plane extrication or extraction. You're maybe going to die. You're going to suffer for sure. So the consequences of screwing up in whitewater on an Arctic expedition are very high. You could die, or it's going to cost you a ton of money and a ton of suffering. So how do you get ready for that? Well, you take a small little whitewater boat and you paddle local rivers with friends, and you try the most difficult maneuvers that you can think of on easy stretches of whitewater. So what are you doing there? You're trying to find the area where the skill development is high, but the consequences are low. Yeah, you could hurt yourself on a local whitewater river, but realistically, if you lose your boat, that would suck. But really, you're just going to go out to the riverside, call a taxi, go home, and bemoan the fate that you lost a $2,000 boat. You've reduced the consequences of failure. So finding a way to train the skills where the consequences of failure are low. So if people want to start getting into the outdoors, which is what you asked about, how do you acquire a lot of experience with low consequences? Well, you're going to start locally. You're going to start, going for a walk in your local forest. You might be going to camp out overnight. And if you hate it, you don't have to do it. So similarly, if you want to go to Paris, if you want to travel Europe alone for a year, you want to backpack Europe for a year, cool. You should probably try going to Paris for a weekend alone, or have you ever traveled alone ever? Let's, go to New York by yourself for the weekend. Let's see if you like being alone. And then, you don't necessarily invest all the time and all the effort to plan your 1 year solo backpacking trip and then find out that you hate it, because that'd be sad. You could spend that time and energy some different way.
How long were you out there? And
okay,
what was it like when you got home?
I had 50 days of food with me. And so trying to have a buffer, because towards the end of the trip, I was reaching Hudson Bay and it was getting to be the end of the summer. And storms start becoming increasingly frequent in that location towards the end of the summer. And it's entirely possible that you could be pinned down, unable to move for 4, 5, 6, 7 days by a really bad weather system. And so I needed to have a buffer of food. So the trip itself ended up being 42 days. I traveled every day except one. One day the weather was so horrific. I basically broke down tent, packed the boat, paddled out 100 feet into the water, got hit by the massive burst of wind, turned around, went back, set up camp in the exact same place where I had been. So that was my rest. That was my one full rest day. So there were 41 days of working really very hard and trying to cover a large distance with that gun to the back of my head of you've only got a finite amount of food and you can't really take more food because it's all more weight. And you start running into the carrying capacity of your boat. And what was it like coming back? It was strange. I, uh, so when I got to Arviat is a little Inuit town on Hudson Bay. No trees. It's open tundra. It's an amazing little town. I love it there. And I got into the hotel room finally. I got the last room at the inn. And it's this tiny
That
little
must have been a
room,
sweet
and
shower.
Yes. Yeah, that was a very, very long shower. But I was just about to get in the shower. I was like, what am I going to wear after? I've been wearing these clothes for basically 50 days. They stink. So I went down to the local store before it closed, and I came away with some camouflage fleece fuzzy pajama bottoms, and then this like t-shirt straight out of the 1990s, this 3/4 length t-shirt. And yeah, I it was what they had, so that's what I was wearing. So then I took about an hour-long shower and went through about 5 razors, but I still had like tufts of hair that I had missed. Yeah, I was just exhausted by that point, and I had to pack for the next day. So I looked like a chemotherapy patient. So I'd lost about 20 pounds. I had tufts of hair coming out of my head. I'm wearing this awful ensemble of clothing. And you know, when you go and you take a flight, they give you your baggage tags so that in the off chance that the security guard at the far end doesn't think that you're legit, that you have to show your bags to show that you have the right to pick that bag up. And they never, ever check. I've only been checked once in my life. That was the time, because I arrived in Vancouver and I got off the plane and I picked up
like,
my
this
bags.
Joker with the camouflage fleece pants.
They thought I was a homeless person there to steal baggage at the airport, and I don't blame them for checking. So yeah, I was reasonably run down. The last is actually one of the big challenges was eating enough, because I was going for so long. By the end of the trip, I was putting in 12 to 14 hour days of paddling, which is really quite a long time. And you're burning so many calories. I could have been eating, if magically Haagen-Dazs had been appearing out of the air, I could have been eating Haagen-Dazs all day long and still losing weight. There's no amount of calories. I think your body just runs into the limits of how much it's able to process. And certainly like ultra runners have that problem as well. How do you eat enough when you're burning 8,000, 9,000 calories a day, and your body doesn't want to digest things as it's working, right? If you're working hard with your muscles, that's where your blood is going. It's not going to your digestive system. So your feeding windows gets quite small, and it's quite challenging to actually get enough bloody calories down your gullet and digest it in your stomach to not lose a ton of weight, which is ultimately, I guess, why human beings are so good at getting fat. Because if you can get fat, if you can put on an extra 20 pounds of weight in the summer, then that's 20 pounds of fat that you can carry into the winter with you. That is difficult. It's difficult for someone to steal that food from you. It's difficult for an animal to get into your fat supply. And, we can, I have friends who've gone into expeditions intentionally 10 pounds overweight. Like they've just been, doing whatever they can to get fat, knowing that they're going to be losing a bunch of weight on the trip. So I don't do that. Haven't done that yet. But it is one approach. So people do struggle with this.
I hate to boil it down to one thing, and it's not possible, I'm sure, with an experience like this, with yourself out in the wilderness for so long, day by day, going through what you did, which, by the way, people can read about in your book, Perseverance, Life and Death in the Subarctic, which we'll plug here. Do you have like something, lessons from this trip that you still carry with you that really impact your life today?
Yeah, so many. I think one became really clear a couple of days after the trip, and I was talking with a couple of friends, and they were interested in the trip, and I was telling them a story, and I was telling them the various adventures, and this was really difficult here, and this was really difficult there, and then I was soaking wet and freezing cold, and I was going upriver here, and then the bugs were unbelievably bad there, and there's bear. And afterwards, one of them kind of looked at me and goes, well, that's a really interesting trip, but did you enjoy it? And that question kind of took me aback. Did I enjoy it? Because the truth is, there were moments of enjoyment on that trip. There were moments of bliss on that trip, but most of it was worrying, and most of it was perseverating on the minutia of what I had to do next. And after thinking about it for a while, I decided that that was the wrong question. It wasn't, did I enjoy it? It's, was it satisfying? And I think that is one of the big lessons for me, that you can navigate your life by trying to find happiness, and happiness is important, but the big direction should be satisfaction, because I think satisfaction is a more durable thing than happiness. Happiness is kind of like the sugar high. And I'm not anti-happiness, and I hope everybody has a lot of happiness, but even more than happiness, I hope that they have a lot of satisfaction, that they can look back at something and say, yeah, that was good. That was, so yeah, I think distinguishing between satisfaction and happiness is one of the enduring lessons there. But there were lots of other revelations, or things that in retrospect, revelations in retrospect, thinking about it and writing about it and trying to look at the larger lessons. I mean, for me, it became really clear that dealing with mortality and dealing with my own mortality and other people's mortality, for me, is inextricably tied to the wilderness. So whether that's an applicable lesson to other people, I don't know. Maybe some people, maybe some percentage of the people that are listening, and perhaps an audience that's interested in travel, is more likely to understand that than a sedentary audience.
Well, I appreciate your time today. Do you want to share with everybody where, if you have any links you want to share, anything? Obviously, we'll link to everything in the show notes.
Sure.
Is there anything you want to share here before we sign off?
I guess I'm a bit of a multiple personality online. If you're interested in the jiu-jitsu or martial art aspect, then if you search for my name and jiu-jitsu or BJJ, I'm all over the place. My main site is grapplearts.com. If you're interested in the outdoor aspect, then I'm building up a property there, Essential Wilderness. So I'm putting, right now, for example, I'm putting on a whole bunch of videos from last summer's expedition, which is separate from the expedition I wrote about in the book, onto my Essential Wilderness channels on YouTube and Instagram. So that if you search for those two aspects, you should find it. I'm also trying to put together an author website, which will hopefully be live by the time that the podcast comes out, where it can be the gateway to both of those worlds. But turns out that writing a book is almost as hard as doing the expedition itself. It is certainly a longer process.
Yeah.
So I think it's turned out pretty good.
Not as dangerous.
I know.
Not as dangerous. But
well, maybe to your soul and your self-esteem, and
dangerous to your psyche, maybe not to your.
Yeah. But people seem to have liked it so far, so that's a promising sign.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I appreciate you taking the time today to share your experience, and we'll link up to the book and everything. Congratulations. Excited to hear what you're up to next and follow along. And yeah, thanks again.
Thank you so much, Jason. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much to Stephan for stopping by the show. Of course, his book, Perseverance, Life and Death in the Subarctic. You can hear the entire story when you read the book. So be sure to check that out if this was something that got you excited and you want to get the nitty-gritty details of what it was like to be on this adventure. Okay, this entire conversation for me was a fresh reminder around why answering that personal call to adventure can be so transformative, whether it's a trip to the next town over, or St. Louis, or the Swiss Alps, or Paris, or wherever. You can answer that call and let it take you where it's going to take you, I guess. Sometimes it's easy to ignore the call to adventure, right? It's not always practical. We have things going on in our lives. We have money considerations. We have career considerations and all this stuff. But at the heart of this show, it does come down to inspiring people out there to answer their own call to adventure. And it's interesting to me because that call is so unique to everybody. And it doesn't have to mean, traveling thousands of miles across the planet. It can mean a lot of different things. So just thought I'd bring that up. And I want to share a quick clip. This was shared all the way at the top of the interview. And this is something I just wanted to highlight to give you something really actionable to send you off with on your day. Have a listen to this clip from earlier in the interview.
There's a kind of an approach I used all the time in martial arts. What are the next 3 things I should work on? And applying that to the outdoors that's a pretty long list. I've got a lot of reading to do and a lot of training to do. And then you just try and skim off, okay, what are the things that are actually going to keep me alive out there? And then we'll start with those, because it'd be rather nice to not freeze to death out on the tundra or be eaten by a polar bear. And all things being equal, we'll start with that being the goal.
Now, I wanted to share that before we parted ways, because this tied in with something I'm doing right now. I said JITL in the beginning of the show. I use that as an acronym for just-in-time learning. That is learning what you need when you need it. And I am an avid reader. So I have read a lot of business books, a lot of different types of books, and not necessarily right when I needed them. So sometimes that knowledge, oftentimes I would say that knowledge just gets lost or does not get implemented. And that doesn't mean I didn't learn something or didn't enjoy the reading experience or didn't take something away from it. But there is something right now, at least with me personally, with the just-in-time learning where when I'm about to implement a certain specific actionable thing, and I'm thinking business related at this point, that idea that Stephan brought up in that clip, what are the next 3 things I should work on? In this case, I would say for me, okay, well, I know the things I'm working on, so let me get a business book associated with that specific thing, and then let me implement that specific thing and move on to the next thing. For you, those next 3 things, maybe books, maybe travel-related, business-related, life-related, it doesn't really matter. It was just that idea I wanted to leave you with, the idea of just-in-time learning, where when it's time to do the thing, then you pick up a book or you do your research or whatever, you dive in, you learn what you need to do, and then you implement. Of course, this seems like it would be, fairly obvious advice, but like I said in the past, at least for me personally, and maybe you're in this category as well, I have found myself just reading books that I'm interested in that moment, in terms of nonfiction, which is great and cool and important. But right now, I find it super helpful to be just focusing on the specific things I need right now. So just coming out of this one, perhaps, however that's hitting you, what are the next 3 things you should work on? And then, just making a list and tackling those one by one instead of just sort of like sporadically researching and kind of being all over the place. And I've been guilty of that so many times. So I'm just really speaking out there to anybody that's had a similar experience to myself and needs a little help focusing. The just-in-time learning thing is really helping me in the business aspect of my life. Anyway, take from that what you will. Hope that's helpful. Okay, I'll leave you with a quote now. This one from Paulo Coelho, who said, "If you think adventure is dangerous, try routine. It is lethal." Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Peace and love to you and yours. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by ZeroToTravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.